So we talked about how Andrew Jackson was instrumental in increasing the power of the presidency. And so if you missed that section, go back and watch the quick 60-second video on Andrew Jackson and how he became so powerful as president. But we're going to move on here. We're going to talk about some of the reasons for presidential power growth. I have 5 reasons. You should take note of these 5. They're not going to show up on the screen here. But the first reason for the power of the president growing over time was the fact that, number one, there is unity in the president's office. By that I mean that he is one person. I realize that the president can often be divisive and people don't agree with him. However, he does not have to run his policies through other people to agree before he makes a statement, or before he issues a proclamation or takes action. The other 2 branches of government do. When you look at Congress, they have to have an agreement of either the 100 senators or a majority of them, or we've got 435 members in the House of Representatives. A lot of other people you have to work alongside. The Supreme Court, 9 justices. You have to work along with those other people. The president's position, he is a lone wolf. He can work on his own and therefore make swift and quick decisions. And so he can execute his powers at any time in any place. And there's no required assembly like we have with Congress to operate. Reason number 2 is that during times of war and crisis, Americans tend to rally around their president and give him additional powers that he may not otherwise have. And the people are a little bit more patient, or perhaps maybe impatient might be the best way to put it, when it comes to crisis times where they want the president to take action and they'll figure out whether it's legal or constitutional later. And so during these times in history, we have seen the president take more power than what a president outside of war or crisis would have the ability to do. Some of our nation's strongest presidents, like Abraham Lincoln or Franklin Roosevelt, they would be examples of wartime presidents that may have taken additional power that in other times may not have been allowed or may not have been considered constitutional. Reason number 3, there are increased demands placed on our government. Most of these demands are placed by the people who have voted these people into office, but the American voters, they want more support from their government. They want things like social services, welfare, health care, all those type of things. And so because of that, the president often takes action to see that those things happen. It's going to be a lot more difficult for Congress to manage these large organizations by committees and that type of thing. So the president often oversees these operations. And so because Congress will push those off on the president can then shape public policy through his leadership of the bureaucracy and of all these other organizations. And that brings me to number 4 on my list here, is that Congress frequently delegates important decisions to the presidency because they don't want to deal with it. Now, this is not a slam on Congress here, but many times they can push off the blame toward the presidency because he's an easy target. It's often politically easier to force people to direct their attention toward the president for inaction, or perhaps an action that people disagree with, than it is for them to take personal responsibility for themselves. And so many presidents have sought increased authority, and so they've said, yeah, I'll take that blame, I'll take that consequence, whatever it may be, in order to have more power. And some people argue that this blurs the separation of powers, and you make the decision for yourself. But the Supreme Court will at times cut back the president's powers and remind the executive branch that those powers belong to Congress, and remind Congress that they need to take action on certain issues. But think about if you were a congressman up for re-election and the topic of building a wall arises in your constituency. Of course, Congress does have the financial power to be able to determine, should we build a wall? Should we finance the wall? That's a congressional power. They also have the ability to draw up a law and pass a bill that would state that we are going to create a border around our southern side of the United States. But somebody who's trying to get reelected, if they are in one of these states that this is a very controversial issue, may want to pass the blame off and say, well, that is the president's initiative. We're going to let him make that decision. And so this happens quite often, which then puts power in the hands of the president. Number 5 on my list for reasons for growth is that presidents here are often the best in the best position to shape public opinion through the media. The media plays an important role here because they are going to try to seek out stories anywhere they can. And the president, because he's one person and because of his power and position, he gets direct access to the media. Now we can see this with President Trump and the way that he has polarized the media and the way that he has tried to shape public opinion through that. He has turned the media as the target rather than perhaps some of his agenda. And some would argue that it has worked very well. Others would say that has been a terrible decision. That, again, is up to you to decide how you think his approach has shaped public opinion. So there are really 2 different views on power here. And we've talked about the loose construction view versus the strict construction view of the Constitution, but that also applies here with presidential power. I want to begin here with the strict or conservative construction view of presidential power. And those that would buy into this, and presidents that have followed this, say that the president should only do what the Constitution or the laws strictly authorizes them to do. This would be the direction that William Howard Taft embraced shortly after becoming president. And part of the reason why Theodore Roosevelt split ties with him and became very angry with him was because of the fact that Taft refused to hold a liberal view to his powers like Theodore Roosevelt had done. So many presidents have embraced the strict, tight view of his role as president. Others, on the other hand, will take a more loose or liberal constructionist view of his powers. Many presidents have gone this direction as well. And the president here should or is allowed to do whatever he believes would be in the best interest of the nation unless the Constitution or law specifically denies him the ability to do that. This is also known as the stewardship theory. And I think it's important that you include stewardship theory here in your notes because the stewardship theory supports the idea that the president is merely a steward of the office. And so he's going to do whatever it is necessary to be able to maintain that office for the betterment of the next president or the American people. And they will often use that as an excuse to perhaps gain their power in a larger way. And I mentioned previously that Theodore Roosevelt championed this view, and he was the one who really promoted it earlier on. But others have said that this could lead to an imperial or almost dictator-like president if they took that power too far. But many presidents have used that. Now let's move on here to executive power.